Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
අර පිරිමැස්ම ගැන හිතන ඔබට Vim Liquid වෙතින් රුපියල් 100ක ඉතිරියක්.
හරිම සුළුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Friday the 6th of January 2023. Steady progress. Sri Lanka expects an Indian response on debt restructure before January end. Expect to bring in new social media platform regulations, says President. Sooner, Sri Lanka will resume third round of talks on SL Thailand FTA on Monday. Freedom. President gives Election Commission freedom to choose course of action for election.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. In a top story for tonight, President Ranil Wickremesinghe said today that India has agreed to respond to Sri Lanka's request of debt restructure by the end of this month. Speaking to newspaper editors and directors of news stations today, the head of state said that Sri Lankan officials had asked China to provide the country with a 20-year repayment plan and not to waive off the loan completely. The head of state meanwhile also said that steps will be taken to introduce new regulations for social media platforms similar to the Telecommunications and Social Media Act currently enacted in Singapore. President Ranil Wickremesinghe said today that the government expects to get the extended fund facility for the International Monetary Fund during the first half of this year. The president made these comments during a discussion carried out at the Presidential Secretariat with newspaper editors and electronic media news directors. The head of state went on to say that India has reassured that they will provide a response to Sri Lanka's request for debt restructuring. However, in terms of China, he said that Sri Lankan officials have begun a new round of discussions with the Chinese officials, which he believes will prove to be fruitful. President Wickremesinghe said that Sri Lanka has not requested China to waive off the loan amount provided to the country, but rather to provide the country with a 20-year repayment plan. He said that they expect to receive a positive response from China in this regard. The president further stated that the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank and other financial organizations stand ready to provide financial assistance to the country as soon as Sri Lanka receives the IMF's EFF facility. In the meantime, President Ranil Wickremesinghe also said that he believes that some measures taken by the government, such as raising VAT and the payee tax, will make some people experience difficulties, but will create the stability and strength the economy needs in time. He added that the country's dollar reserves could be enhanced through the privatization of Sri Lanka Telecom, Sri Lankan Airlines, Sri Lanka Insurance and other state-run institutions. The head of state pointed out that new tax policies, restructuring loss-making state entities, along with other reforms needed to be carried out in the economy, will help the country get the much-needed IMF bailout package. The president, who mentioned that he held another discussion with representatives of the Tamil National Alliance yesterday afternoon, said that he will start discussions from next Tuesday on getting the views of other political parties regarding the process of power sharing and how it should be implemented. In the meantime, during the discussion, in response to questions raised by journalists about the program followed by the government regarding the activities of certain social media operators, the president stated that although there are laws in Sri Lanka for newspapers and electronic media, the country lacks a legal framework for the regulation of social media. With that being the case, the president stated that he has brought the Telecommunications and Social Media Act currently in use in Singapore and hopes to study it and prepare a legal framework suitable for Sri Lanka in the future. President Wickremesinghe says the Election Commission has the liberty to take necessary decisions on the local government election. During a meeting with the Election Commission, the President instructed the Commission to discuss with the relevant parties on matters pertaining to the financial provisions and the security for the election and arrive at a suitable agreement with them. A discussion on the local government election was held yesterday between President Ranil Wickremesinghe and the Election Commission. The discussion, which took place at the Presidential Secretariat, was also participated by Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena and Attorney General Sanjay Rajaratnam. During the meeting, President Wickremesinghe said the Election Commission has the liberty to take all independent decisions on the local government election, and more advice in this regard can be obtained from the Attorney General. The President instructed the Commission to discuss with the relevant parties on matters pertaining to the financial provisions and security for the election and arrive at a suitable agreement with them. Sri Lanka has restarted negotiations on trade pacts with India, China and Thailand after a 4-year hiatus in a bid to rebuild the country's economy and boost exports to foreign markets. According to Sri Lanka's chief negotiator of free trade agreements, K.G. Veerasinghe, officials from Thailand are scheduled to arrive in Sri Lanka on Monday to start the third round of talks on the Sri Lanka-Thailand free trade agreement. He also said that China has responded positively to resuming talks rather pertaining to the China-Sri Lanka FTA, which suspended in 2018. Reuters, quoting Sri Lanka's chief negotiator of free trade agreement, K.G. Veerasinghe, said officials from Thailand are scheduled to arrive in Sri Lanka on Monday to start the third round of talks on Sri Lanka-Thailand FTA after negotiations were suspended in 2018. The Reuters article said negotiations with India and China, Sri Lanka's biggest trading partners, accounting for about $5 billion each in bilateral trade in 2021, are expected to begin in February and March. Veerasinghe further said the focus is on improving economic cooperation and attracting investment, which is crucial for Sri Lanka to emerge out of the current economic crisis, adding that his main goal is to have all these deals completed by the end of 2023 or early 2024. Quoting Director General of Thailand's Department of Trade Negotiations, Oraman Suptavithum, Reuters reported that talks on the Thai-Lanka FTA delayed due to Sri Lanka's economic crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic, and that they will now head to Sri Lanka to continue the discussion. According to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, bilateral trade between Thailand and Sri Lanka totaled around $460 million in 2021. Reuters further reported that Sri Lanka is aiming to deepen its existing FTA with the northern neighbour India to an economic and technology agreement after talks stalled in 2018. The article also said that Sri Lanka is looking to add services and investment to the current agreement that primarily covers trade in goods. Sri Lanka's chief negotiator of the free trade agreements also told Reuters that the free trade agreement discussions with China also stalled in 2018 over disagreements about the pace of liberalizing of Sri Lanka's economy. However, said both the countries responded positively on resuming talks. Now, Australian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka Paul Stephens assured support to Sri Lanka during his discussions with the International Monetary Fund and meetings at the Paris Club. He gave this assurance to Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena during a recent meeting at the Prime Minister's office. The Prime Minister appreciated Australian assistance to Sri Lanka to strengthen maritime security in the Indian Ocean region and requested further assistance to provide GPS technology to fishing vessels to strengthen communication networks. The Premier also said that Australian universities could establish affiliated campuses in Sri Lanka to attract not only local students but also from other countries in Asia, Middle East and Africa. He added that investors should also enter into new areas such as fisheries, agriculture, information technology, renewable energy, electronics and tourism. The private gas supplier Laughs Gas plc also announced a reduction in price of its LP gas cylinders. Accordingly, a 12.5 kilogram gas cylinder of Laughs will now be sold at 5,080 rupees within the Colombo district, while a 5 kilogram cylinder will be sold at rupees 2,032. This price reduction came a day after the state gas supplier Litrogas Lanka Limited reduced the prices of its LP gas products. Meanwhile, consumers have been requested to contact the consumer service hotline 1345 in order to find out the price reductions of Laughs domestic gas LP cylinders within their respective districts. And stay with us as we bring you our business segment to you right after this short commercial break.
when you're listening to the same old Slim Bread Week, a week for professionals.
Welcome back. Now, global equities traded sideways and the dollar bounced as investors braced for a crucial US jobs report later today that may firm the Federal Reserve's resolve to keep raising interest rates. The MSCI World Equity Index was flat heading into US morning trade on course of its fifth consensus week drop, despite a brief rally early in the week. US E-mini stock futures were also flat after 1.16% overnight slide for the S&P 500 yesterday, following private payrolls data that showed a bigger than expected rise in employment and a drop in jobless claims. Many investors hope to see sky-high inflation subdue in the coming months. But markets risk further being unsettled today by any signals in the official non-farm payrolls report that may make the Fed more determined to prevent a loop of rising wages and prices. The world's most influential central bank has already pulled benchmark borrowing costs up to their highest level in 15 years. The dollar index, which measures the greenback against 6 counterparts including the yen and euro, rose 0.4% to 105.56, taking its weekly gain to more than 2% and putting it on track for its best one-week performance since late September. US 2-year Treasury yields, which tracks interest rate expectations, spiked to a more than 2-month high of 4.49% overnight before easing to 4.4571% during European morning trading. The 10-year yield, which rose as high as 3.784% in New York yesterday, was flat at 3.7088%. In Europe, the broad stock 600 equity index edged 0.1% higher, despite data today showing a sharp drop in Eurozone inflation. Germany's extra DAX traded flat. The euro is 0.3% lower to $1, taking its fall against the dollar this month to 2.1%. The oil prices rebalanced today after an early $1 rally as a stronger dollar and weaker economic outlook weighed, while hopes of a Chinese demand boost limited losses. Brent crude futures fell 24 cents to $78.45 a barrel. US West Texas Intermediate crude futures were down 24 cents at $73.43. Both contracts rose by more than $1 early in Friday's session, but fell as the dollar rose to a one-month high. A stronger dollar can crimp demand for oil as dollar-denominated commodities become more expensive for holders of other currencies. The rally came after US economic data highlighted a still tight labor market that could prompt the US Federal Reserve to keep raising interest rates aggressively. Markets now turn their attention to the closely watched US payrolls report due later today. Some price support followed news that China, the world's largest crude importer, expects passengers traffic by road, rail, water and air during the coming Lunar New Year holidays to double from the same period in 2022. China, the economy of which has been hit by another COVID wave, also announced more state support measures yesterday. Further bullish sentiment came from a higher than expected fall in US distillate inventories in the week to 30th December. On a weekly basis, both the Brent and WTI contracts were on track to fall by almost 9% on the previous week, pressured by concern over the possibility of a global recession. The world's top crude exporter Saudi Arabia lowered prices for the Arab light crude oil. It sells to Asia to its lowest since November 2021, amid the global pressures hitting oil. The US services industry activity contracted for the first time in more than 2.5 years in December amid weakening demand, while the pace of increase in prices paid by businesses slowed considerably, offering more evidence that inflation was abating. The Institute for Supply Management said today that the PMI dropped to 49.6 last month from 56.5 in November. It was the first time since May 2020 that the services PMI fell below the 50 threshold, which indicates contraction in the sector that accounts for more than 2/3 of US economic activity. Outside the COVID-19 pandemic slump, this was the weakest services PMI reading since late 2009. The index is also now below the 50.1 level, which the ISM says over time is consistent with a recession in the broader economy. And the US warship sailed through the Taiwan Strait today, part of what the US military calls routine activity, but which China calls provocative. In a statement, the US military said that the Alaigbu-class guided missile destroyer Changhoon carried out in the transit. The statement said that Changhoon's transit through the Taiwan Strait demonstrates the United States' commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. In a statement, spokesman for China's embassy in Washington said that China firmly opposed the move and urged the United States to immediately stop provoking troubles, escalating tensions, and undermining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. It said China will continue to stay on high alert and is ready to respond to all threats and provocations at any time, and will resolutely safeguard its national sovereignty and territorial integrity. And that's all the news we have for this evening. Join us again tomorrow for the very latest news at the very same time. Have a pleasant evening and good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.